Mark, in trying to get the episode notes for this podcast, I'm struggling in my mind what to call it. Is it the Life of Marc Aylott or Life and Times of Marc Aylott? What do we call it, Mark?
I think if I had to be really truthful, Gary, this should be about my passion for Aston Martin, the Mark, and all the great memories that I've got from working with the Mark and people within that
environment.
Yeah.
I think so. So I think what we do, we'll play the jingle and let's get cracking.
What jingle have we playing?
You'll find out when you listen to it.
This is the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast with Gary Taylor.
Hello, listener. Thank you for joining us on the latest edition of the Aston Martin podcast. And we have a very special guest. We have Marc Aylott. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Well, Gary, I feel quite privileged to be part of your podcast.
You're here, in my mind, for several reasons. Firstly, you are very well known in Aston Martin owner club circles via the members and by default the wider Aston Martin community. So I thought it'd be a great idea to find out something about you, your background and why Aston Martin. And secondly, a while back while we was having a couple of shandies in the pub, you said to me you wrote on a spreadsheet a life achievement list. And it struck me, why would you want to depress yourself? But more than that, you actually expanded on it. It says, well, in that life achievement list, you had listed all the Aston Martins, and they were very special Aston Martins you had driven over the years. So I would like to get your memories of that. So I think we'll cover that later on, if that's okay, Mark.
Sounds good to me, yeah.
So let's kick off. At the beginning, why Aston Martin? How did this come about?
Well, at the time, I was working in the big city in London. My Corgi DB5 that I owned, I was always very proud of when I was a kid. A bit akin to Paul Hollywood, really, in that behind his perhaps desires to be involved with Aston Martin. And strangely enough, I had the pleasure of meeting Paul once at the barn and had the opportunity to ask him the question. Yeah, we both had similar reasons for it. So
you got the DB5 Corgi toy, and at some point you probably come across the Aston Martin Owners Club.
I noticed that you didn't have to be an owner to be part and parcel of this organisation. I had no idea what it was like, but I decided to join. It sort of all goes from there, really, because things started to happen not that long after I joined, in that my welcome pack didn't arrive, so I made as I normally do, chase something up, and I ended up talking to a lady who actually did my role at the club before me and before others as well. She very kindly said, "Oh, we'll get it posted out to you, Mark." And I thought, well, actually, no. Why don't I go and visit the place? So I took it.
Was it at the barn?
It was at the barn, yeah.
Okay.
And I drove over to Oxford or to Drayton St Leonard. She very kindly showed me round. I asked the question. So I'm a member now. I don't own a car. You know, what is it we do? I had no idea really, but it was sounded very grand, very glamorous. I remember her having a conversation in front of the trophy cabinet. I asked the question, so, you know, what do we do then? And she asked me, well, she said, do I detect some enthusiasm with, you know, you're joining us? I said, well, yeah, of course. She said, you'll regret that one day, with a smile. That's really where it all started. It was with Diane, who was then the club secretary.
And we'll come on to that later on, I think. We've got plenty to cover about your enthusiasm for Aston Martin in the AMOC.
How long have you got?
Right, we're now going to wrap up this podcast. Thank you for joining us. Let's go back a bit further. I looked into your notes, and you wanted to be a footballer.
I did, yeah. And, you know, when I was 14 years old, I was, with the help of my games teacher at school, he introduced me to senior football at Bridport in Dorset, where I started my footballing life. It sort of escalated for me. I mean, I was just sort of like a kid from working class background, did all right at school. I was head boy actually at school, which not many people know. And I excelled in quite a few sports. So I had the good fortune to part of my character was helped with sport. Whilst playing senior football for Bridport in my local town, it sort of shaped me into the type of person that, teamwork is really important to me. And I think that's probably where it started. I had the good fortune to be scouted by, I think he became Sir Franco Farrell, actually, who previously managed Manchester United. And after that, he then became a scout down in Torquay. And unbeknown to me, he was watching a game that I was playing in against Falmouth Town in the Western League Cup semi-final, where I scored, and I'm going to describe this as a wonder goal.
It was a wonder goal, was it?
It was a wonder goal. I probably couldn't have described it in any better way. Like they do on the telly. Well, it would have won the goal of the season, this goal. It's sort of sailed into the top left-hand corner.
Are there any YouTube videos of this?
Sadly, not in those days, no.
So in your mind, it's still a wonder goal,
I can picture it now. Okay. I can feel it now. But it just emphasised to me sport is everything to me. Relate that to what I've been doing over many years afterwards as well, when it comes to the AMOC or to any motorsport that I'm involved in. And everything involves being in a team. That sort of changed me from the local lad who suddenly was escalated to being invited to go to Old Trafford. And for those of you that are not football familiar, that's the home of Manchester United, where I spent the next 6 weeks. And for me, it was a great experience. But it was the first time probably that I felt the effects of, I say failure, right? It wasn't a failure. But you got to pick yourself up and get on with it again, But it did change my life a little bit because, even in a town like Bridport, when people speak to you and say, "Hi, Mark, how are you? How's things going?" And they see you as a little bit of a mini celebrity. So it boosted my confidence. It did me an awful lot of good. The lad from the southwest grew up around that sort of time. And I continued to play football. Even though I didn't make it in professional football, I played semi-professional football for a good number of years. To this day, it's probably one of the highlights of my lifetime so far. Along with others, there are others that go along with it. I think one of the things that I always wanted to be able to do was to, for my parents to be proud of me. And I think they were. So
you weren't going to be a professional footballer, and you changed course. And banking is...
Does that not resonate?
That's quite a leap, isn't it? Well, not quite a leap forward or a leap backwards, it's a leap.
Well, I lived in a little village called Burton Bradstock, and my mum knew the man that worked in the bank. And in those days, banking was quite good to be in. So I joined a particular bank. I continued to play semi-professional football, along with being a bank clerk. I moved from various different branches in the south of England, and I think I lasted about 8 or 9 years. I decided that it was time to spread my wings a little bit. I worked in sales, I worked overseas. I suppose really that the last major role I had was with pubs, working in pubs. Ran 4 pubs for a large, well-known brewer in this country. And ultimately...
You can mention names, we're not the BBC,
Okay, well, Mitchells and Butler, who are the Harvester and Vintage Inn people. I ended up actually being a pub policeman, which is
pub policeman?
Like an auditor. But they used to call us risk managers. Did me really well until... And this is where I revert back to challenges in life, and maybe you think things are a failure, because I was made redundant. From my role. Mitchells and Butler decided to lose 60-odd staff at that level, and I was one of them. It was the first time where I had to sort of make some life decisions as to what I did next.
That was that period. Now we move up to, 2004, 2005, and this is where Aston Martin starts to come into play?
Yeah, it does. I'd realised that I could be active within the club in ways that I never dreamt.
Because clubs, AMOC, other clubs, I'm aware of, they're all asking for volunteers. And it seems quite a generic term. You think, well, what can I do? Did you ever feel that? What do you want me to do?
Well, that was when, a bit like when I spoke to Diane first, when I said, so what do we do in this club? What's it all about? And so I went along to the first SOCOM meeting in January 2005.
That's the social committee, isn't it?
Oh, sorry,
social committee.
Jargonising.
Yeah.
I inwardly digested, as you do. I kept quiet, but I somehow ended up with jobs. Because I must have held my hand up at some point. Aston Martin Owners Club St George's Day Parade at Windsor Castle. So that was my first experience of meeting members, club members that is, and also members of the royal family.
As you do.
As you do, yeah. And access to Windsor Castle that few mortals have had the ability to experience.
Was that your first gig?
Yes, it was.
That's quite something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was quite spectacular. There's a lot of running around to do. Meetings at the estate office. It introduced me to people, and also particular people who I'd like to mention in this because they've had quite an influence and shaped my future in involving me in things that I didn't dream of I would get involved in. One of those being Mr. Roger Bennington. It became known to me that he was known as sort of Mr. Aston Martin. The Bond thing came to light as well when he turned up, flew his own helicopter into the estate office at Windsor Castle and got out and took his flak jacket off and was dressed in very much like Mr. Bond would be dressed, and walked across to everybody and introduced himself. It's quite something to witness him arriving at the estate office in his helicopter. Because everybody stopped. I mean, little did I know that he would be part of my journey to this present day as well in later times. So I always like to acknowledge Roger on that basis, and still friends with Roger now. You know, the aftermath of that event led to a dinner at the in the NCO mess at the Household Cavalry in Windsor, and there I'm thinking, actually, I don't even own an Aston Martin apart from my Corgi one.
Have you still got a Corgi one?
I have, yeah, along with a number of others as well.
So despite not owning an Aston Martin, or one with a, should we say, with an engine, you had some models, you seem to be getting quite involved in the Aston Martin community, weren't you?
Yeah, I think the success of...
Just by putting your hand up?
Yeah.
And showing some enthusiasm.
And being enthusiastic to make things work.
Have you found that you're always enthusiastic about things? I mean, we go back to the football days, being the pub manager or pub policeman. You throw yourself into these things, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I always want to get the job done. Along the way, there's always things that will be thrown in front of you to trip you up, and you've got to get around those sort of things, but you've got to do it without people knowing and without it showing, and making sure that the event runs smoothly. You know, you have the hard talk after you've finished, and you learn from what has gone wrong and how you put it right.
So following on to this, there was the concept of the Aston Martin concours. That's become a big thing with the Aston Martin Owners Club in well, I say recent years, for many years. That was you was there in the early days, were you?
Well, if we go back to 2005, I missed the Kingston Lacey event. I couldn't attend. But from the next year onwards, I was an integral part in organising 31 concours events. Now, the only reason I know it's 31 is because I totted them up the other day, because I thought it might be a useful bit of information.
31?
31, yeah. Now, not all concours events, but events that involve similar requirement to arrange cars at big venues, places like Blenheim Palace.
Now, we're probably jumping ahead of ourselves. You and I have worked at Donington Historic, the Silverstone Classic or the Silverstone Festival now. These concours events, how are they different? Are they managed different? Are there different expectations? What I always find them, they're a different tempo, aren't they?
It involves a lot of people, a lot of effort. There's a lot of small detail that's needed, and there's a lot of preparation building the next concours. You almost need to start building as soon as you've finished the previous one. Bear in mind, we've been to some spectacular locations. The 2010 concours at Blenheim Palace involved a fly past with a Spitfire, and I still remember looking up and just seeing everybody's faces go up in the air when this Spitfire flew over Blenheim Courtyard. It's all about, cleaning your car and how you look after your car and how the judges view your car. And there they are in their white coats, laying on the floor, looking underneath, finding things in the boot that shouldn't be there. And it's down to points at the end of the day. The members that have won at concours, they're very proud of the fact that they've won at concours. It does sort of highlight their car as being something special. But at the same time, along with that is the social side of it as well. And everybody comes together twice a year at a nice venue, a nice dinner. And that's what being a member of the AMOC is all about, is being able to create those sort of moments. It's always nice as well when somebody relates back to you and say, oh, you remember when we were at Alnwick Castle? There was an occasion for me to have to organise something who had lost or managed to shut the keys of a DB7 in the boot of the car, and they were unable to get away in the car.
How many stories have I heard of DB7 keys being locked in a boot?
But I picked up the problem, and I rang the independent dealership in the North East, and I got some advice from them, and they told me to go and get a paperclip. So I acquired this paperclip, and under instruction went under the steering wheel and inserted one end of the paperclip in one junction point and put the other one in the other junction point. And lo and behold, the boot popped up.
Or the car could have exploded. I mean, what could have gone wrong there?
It would have been like a Bond film, that would have been, wouldn't it? But I could have been... I was the saviour of the day, but it was down to advice and help from somebody else who were also part of the team. Thanks to the boys at Aston Workshop who were on the other end of the telephone advising me what to do, because I'm no mechanic. I think I earned my dues that day because I was a very popular lad.
Marvellous. I think so. If any listeners, they've got their keys locked in the DB7 boot, Mark is available on 07 da-da-da-da-da.
And I come with a paperclip as well.
He comes with a paperclip. He always has a paperclip handy. Perfect. Other than repairing cars or getting into cars, can we move on to the AM Centenary at Kensington Palace? That was 100 years of Aston Martin. That was 2013.
It was, yeah. I mean, of all the concours events, this was the one that probably had the longest planning time, association with Aston Martin, the factory, the company itself, involvement with their senior people. It was a combined effort between the club.
This was during the Dr. Betts era, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yeah, it was. A lot of work went into finding cars to make up the 100 cars that were displayed on the Broadwalk at Kensington Palace. There were many hours of angst trying to find things, but in the end, we managed to find all the cars we needed, and they were all delivered to Kensington Palace throughout that week, with cars being dropped in with cranes and various bits of equipment that were necessary to get them in.
How did you deal with the security for this?
Quite complex in itself. There was a lot of meetings beforehand and a lot of presence of people that you actually didn't really know they were there.
Right.
But they were there. And I suppose they trusted us to a certain extent to get it right. That probably is the most memorable of all the event. We won't call that a concours event. That was a celebratory event. And along with it came some other sociable activities as well, where people went to the Freemasons in the City of London for a very spectacular night out with Aston Martin, and I think lunch in the Orangery at Kensington Palace as well. We were blessed with really good weather.
Let's follow that into a totally different area of your work at the AMOC. It was actually Le Mans, the Le Mans 24-hour race.
Well, I knew nothing about Le Mans at all. Had heard of it, but I didn't really have any idea. Le Mans is the sort of place where camaraderie and what you try to build in a membership club, you tend to find when you go to Le Mans as well. It could be on the ferry, it could be en route in a French town, stopping off for coffee or whatever. You know, you meet people and then you meet them again the next year. Ultimately, you become friends and you're there for the same reason.
It's a great leveler as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah, because going to Le Mans is not that I've been to a Formula One race, but going to Le Mans is quite rough and ready in a lot of ways, unless you do it in a really spectacular, expensive way. You're either going to camp or you're going to find a hotel which is a bit further out from the circuit, which means you've got to drive into the circuit. It's hot, it's dusty,
And it's a long event.
It is,
like
yeah.
An F1 where
Yeah.
it's, so I know you could spend a day prepping for it and then afterwards, but this is 24 hours.
Yeah. You and I both know we've been to Le Mans in the same sort of group, and every year is different. You think you go back to the same thing every year, and there would be repetition of the race is repeated every year, but there's always something that is a tale not to tell when you get home, because don't forget, what goes on at Le Mans stays in Le Mans.
Oh, absolutely.
Doesn't it, Gary?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. I'm not trying to incriminate you at all, but...
that's another podcast on another platform.
Yeah. But it's got a pull, and you just get this desire to return every year. Same old thing, same old people.
Was this the first time the AMOC officially went to Le Mans and went through a ticketing agency and had a dedicated site for camping?
Well, my first visit to Le Mans was to accept the featured mark, which that particular year was Aston Martin. Yeah. Now this is organised by the Classic British Welcome at Saint-Saturnin, which is at the north of Le Mans, and it's an organisation. The only way I can describe it is like a French fete for cars, and they organise this, and they then do a parade into the city. And it becomes part of the carnival on the Friday evening. And it involves more than Aston Martins, but Aston Martin actually led from the front on that basis and was quite an eye-opener for me. I ended up having to go on stage and accept the featured mark on behalf of Aston Martin. Not that I think Aston Martin were aware of it. But for me, it was quite something to be able to be asked to do. I was representing the club, and I wanted to make sure I did it properly. And it's another great memory for me. The next thing I did was I hosted a members tour. Ended up it featured my only drive of the Circuit de 24 Heures, as it's known in France, in the then AMOC chairman's DB6 Volante, which was an unforgettable experience. And to be trusted and given the opportunity, I'd like to thank Michael Urban immensely for that, because it's probably the only time I'll ever drive at Le Mans on the circuit. And it was just a beautiful sunny day. It wasn't done at pace, but it felt like it. It felt like I was going like a...
And if I remember Michael's DB6 Volante, it's been breathed on.
Just a little bit, yeah. It's a special car. And
very special car.
Hence my being very grateful for him to give me the opportunity. I've got the certificate at home, which perhaps I ought to give to him, to be honest. But I drove the car, so I kept the certificate. So, yeah, unfortunately, the proof isn't there. It could be I could be telling a tale here, but I think Michael will back me up on the fact that he passed me the keys and said, there you go, you can drive tomorrow. And I didn't know what to say. And he left it with me that evening as well, and I ended up having to... So I led the parade, basically, that went on before the 24-hour race in, I think that was 2005. We've done many other ways of staying at Le Mans. You can stay in a campsite, and I think you've done that.
Yeah, and you were a nightmare. And I'm going to come in on this, because I went with you.
Yeah, you did.
A few times on the campsite. And I think you went there not as an AMOC rep. I think you went there privately. I think I'm going on holiday.
I think the idea of hosting came to an end, really.
Yeah.
But I wanted to continue to go to Le Mans, so I booked the week off every year.
That's it.
And I don't know how I ended up with you.
You had no friends, and I was the only one available.
Oh, maybe, yeah, that's true.
And so I went with you, and at about the same time. Now, by this time, I think you was getting pretty well established in the AMOC, and you was well known. So a lot of the AMOC members were on the site, and we rocked up, pitched a tent. Now, at about the same time, I managed to schmooze from David Richards from ProDrive, Aston Martin Racing.
You did, yeah.
Some press passes to go for us to go into the press room for them to talk about the launch of their racing series, to discuss it. And time was short. And we got there, and I said, right, Mark, we got to go. And as we started walking away, some member approached you. Oh, Mark, hello, Mark. And rather than you saying, oh, I can't deal with it now, that was very irritating, because we was getting quite late for the meeting. But having said that, it showed that you was, even though you weren't on duty, you weren't there as an AMOC rep, you still wanted to deal with the members' requirements.
I think I've always been seen as a representative of the club who is prepared to try and sort a problem out.
Yeah.
And of course, you get to know people. It's who you know, a lot of it. And I've realised that
you weren't sorting my problem out, were you?
No. Well, you can sort your own out. Oh. Will I ever take up camping again? Maybe not. I mean, I've done it in all sorts of different ways. I've stayed in hotels, and don't forget our long-term association with Jack and Madeline.
Yes.
In Arnage, yeah?
Perfect.
Which I used to say it almost became the French HQ for the Aston Martin Owners Club.
It did, actually,
and Jacques was always very appreciative of that.
He had a lovely house, and he had some lovely gardens, and probably once or twice a year with the Le Mans Classic as well, his lawn would just be full of Aston Martins, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I suppose you can understand why he was quite keen to have us there.
Yeah.
But one thing about Jacques and Madeline, they greeted us when we arrived, and there was always a table to sit at. We'd all sit around the table, again, like a team of people.
On the private visits that you and I and Tim and Ben, and of course then the Le Mans Classic for the AMOC took on a life of its own, and that became Jacques' place, Jacques and Madeline's place became the base for the AMOC, didn't it?
Yeah. Well, I went to Le Mans in 2012 for the Classic, and I did represent the club, and I went quite unknowing what to expect. And so I arrived, and the area on the flats, as I call it, which is quite gravelly and whatever, is where Aston Martin cars were to be parked. I'll always remember there were 90 cars turned up, and we managed to squeeze them all in. The facilities on offer were 2 witches' hat marquees with a table in each of them and 8 chairs. And from 2012, it then started to grow into a hospitality offer, which grew and grew until it's still going now. In 2023, the club provided that hospitality, which I believe has been such a great success, and people have got such good memories from some of the classics they visited because of what was actually provided by the membership.
Expectations. The Le Mans Classic has a totally different feel, totally different tempo to the 24 hours. So, as you say, you and I are members. Perhaps they go camping, and that's your mindset. But at Le Mans Classic, the AMOC had to lay on a better hospitality. They couldn't have an Argos tent there and a few tables. It had to be done properly, and it expanded over the years. And you said there was a champagne reception and all the rest of it. And I think once that started, Mark, you can't pedal back from that. It's been set, and there's a lot of work goes into manning these things, isn't there?
It involved.
And you say 90 cars originally. I think it was always over 100 cars.
I would say on average 120 cars.
120 cars coming in, all need to be parked. When the circuit is open, people are milling around and all the rest of it. It's a full-on job, isn't it?
The Aston Martin Owners Club became one of the key contributors to Le Mans Classic when it came to the hospitality offer. The marquee was probably the biggest. The presence of cars was the biggest. Maybe Porsche was not far behind. Yeah. I think if anybody's listening now that's been to a Le Mans Classic will join me in celebrating what we did and the success of what I hope will keep going. Of course, it's now in 2020.
Next year, 2025. Yeah.
And there's a lot of work that goes into actually putting that together. We work in conjunction with the French organisation that sort of had the running of the circuit for that particular period.
When would you start planning for Le Mans Classic? So it's in July. When would you start? Starting
now.
Now, a year ahead.
Now, it needs to be a year ahead to make sure you get it how you want it. Unless you commit to it, you will not be given the next time round. If you let the organisation down, they are expecting you. You let them down, and you might not get your pitch the next time. So there is a big commitment to it.
I think it became a destination. I think it's always important, whether it's Le Mans Classic, Goodwood Revival, whatever. I mean, these places can be overwhelming, and I think it's good that the AMOC has a a destination for members that they can go to, rest, see other people, see other members. They have a bolt hole they can go to, and it's a lovely bolt hole.
Yeah.
You want somewhere nice to go.
Yeah.
It's the benefit of being a member.
I've just had a thought. I did you a big favour once. Do you remember that time when it was down to my, it was my fault.
You've done me no favours ever.
It was my fault. I miscalculated on the rooms at Jacques. As a result of that, I ended up giving up my room. Right. Both you and Jane were there, and I've if it had been you, I wouldn't have done it. But the fact that it was you and Jane, I felt obliged to go find somewhere else. Anyway, Jacques put me on to somebody who owned a farm down the road. I remember this empty room at the top of a warehouse on a farm about a mile away from where the little town of Arnage, and the cows were in the field outside, and I think they probably slept underneath where I was sleeping because the stench was really quite unbearable.
That's what the cow said.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Anyway, I managed it, and of course, I kept everybody happy on that basis.
I do partly remember that.
It was doing it for the team, I think you call that one, don't you?
Yeah, okay. Let's move on from Le Mans, because we could fill the podcast up with Le Mans, to cars, actual Aston Martin cars. And I kicked off at the beginning of the podcast by saying you did a life achievement chart, and in that, find out about these cars, because you mentioned these cars to me when we went out for a few drinks, and I thought, well, they are some very impressive cars. Now, some people are fortunate enough to have a collection of Aston Martins, and they have driven them, and very nice too. But you've been behind the wheel of some serious cars through the benefits of being with the AMOC and latterly the AMHT.
And I consider that a real privilege to have been given that sort of opportunity. But one really big bonus in this is that I don't get the bills that come with the actual running of the cars. So, I think I did tot them up, and I think it's come to 18. And
we've got a list there. Do you want to blast through them?
Yeah, well, of course, at the barn, under the auspices of the Aston Martin Heritage Trust, there is over the years has been a spectacular amount of historic Aston Martins, which we've had the privilege to look after for either various people, organisations, or whatever. Probably the most exciting for me was probably DBR1, which spent some time at the barn. And I remember Chris Woodgate brought DBR1 to the barn. He explained to Donna and I, Donna being the lady who was the
curator
at the museum then, how it worked. Now, this car, if it was left in the street, you wouldn't be able to nick it. You know, it was quite complex to start. You had to know what to do with it. We had the opportunity to drive the car. We drove it up and down the road from the main road to the barn itself. So I can safely say that I've driven one of the cars that was a winner at Le Mans. Came second at Le Mans, I think, this particular one. And also at the centenary event as well. I'm there in my high-vis jacket, as I always am.
As always.
And I heard the word go out, DBR1 had been delivered and it was sat in front of the palace. But the press wanted it moving. Suddenly the call went out for me because I was the only one that knew how to actually get the thing going.
Okay.
So I've got a picture of me sat in DBR1 in front of Kensington Palace, just prior to me actually moving it probably 10 feet. But that was quite an exciting element to that particular event, was the fact I drove DBR1 on the Broadwalk at Kensington Palace. I'm looking at the list here now. So, we'll start at the beginning. I think this is almost in date order, actually. A3, clearly the probably most important historic vehicle that still that exists in Aston Martin circles. It's a bit like driving a bathtub.
It is a bit.
You've driven it, haven't you?
I've driven it, yeah. I drove it at the 110 years at Silverstone last year. It's a unique experience. So once you know what you're doing, it's a lovely car to drive. My
preference is to drive the Ulster. I've had many a time with the Ulster where things have maybe not gone to plan. I had to take it into London once. And on my journey back, the fuel gauge was never particularly accurate. No. I got to the traffic lights at a particular part on the A42, which escapes me at the moment, but before you get out into West London, it stopped, ran out of fuel.
Oh, okay.
And I had no idea because of the gauge. So I looked along the pathway and I collared a chap who I found out he was a Polish chap, and he was very helpful. He assisted me pushing this very expensive, valuable car around off of the A40 onto a housing street. And I sat there in it thinking, what am I going to do? I've got no canister to get fuel.
No.
So I'm there in a bit of a predicament, and I've got this car that I don't want to leave on its own because it's such a valuable historic vehicle. But down the road, I notice two men who are tinkering with a classic car, and I can't remember what it was. And I thought, right, this is my opportunity. So I legged it off down the road, and I said, gents, could you give me a hand? I've got a problem. I've got a very valuable car. It's run out of fuel, and you haven't got a petrol can, have you? And they go, where are you? I said, look, up there. And he goes, what's that? I said, it's an Aston Martin Ulster. It turned out that they actually raced in some of the AMOC racing. There I am explaining myself, and they said, no problem at all. We'll look after it whilst you... And I'm having to be quite trusting here, but they said all the right things. They actually mentioned Roger Bennington's name, which actually was quite...
Okay, gave some comfort.
Yeah, it gave me a bit of comfort. So they gave me the petrol can. I legged it off to get some fuel, and they kept an eye on it. I got back, we put some fuel in it, decided it was time to get going again. It was time of year, it sort of got dark around, 8 o'clock or so, and it was quite late evening that I was there, having sort of stopped on the A40. And I'm driving it back, and I'm going up the M40 now, and little do I know that, and you'll probably sort of relate to this, Gary, is that the lights on the Ulster are not particularly bright.
No.
So I'm driving along, and I'm getting a lot of cars going past me, thinking that, that's a nice car. Really nice car. Oh, right, yeah, okay. Then I realise I've got no lights. So I get to the junction past the Stokenchurch cutting, and I manage to cruise round off the motorway, and I come round to the T-junction, and I come to a halt because the battery has run out. Now, in the Ulster, there are two batteries. There's one on the passenger side, one on the driver's side. And the other one's there, as a spare. But I had to get out, and it's not very easy to get in and out of the Ulster, is it?
No.
So I got out of the Ulster, and I just managed to do that before another car came round the corner. And I'm waving frantically at this car because I'm at a junction where people could have hit me, and hit me hard. I'm on my own. Anyway, the guy behind got out of his car, and he was very helpful. He put his flashes on and everything. I managed to change the batteries over, jump back in. Perfect. I've got quite a love for the Ulster, just through experiences with it. I drove it all the way to Brands Hatch once when it was, we used it as a car to go around the circuit in between races, but it's quite a special car. And I know I've spent a lot of time on it. There's a lot of other cars here, but I think of all the Aston Martins I've driven, it's you need to know how to drive it.
You need to know how to drive it, and you don't pussyfoot with it either.
No.
I remember when I first drove it, I hated the damn thing. It was just so hard work. But I found if you gave it a bit of attitude, it came back and rewarded you. You had to drive it and push it.
Drive it hard. I think it's an old car, but you just needed to make sure you use what power it had.
Yeah.
A couple of others on here which I've had the pleasure. I remember at Englefield, I was asked to look after one of the Red Arrows edition cars.
All right,
which was Red 10.
The Vanquish.
Yeah, I ended up having to sort of drive it through the estate and park it up in the courtyard, ready for it to be picked up. So I was quite privileged to do that. And, various other cars on here that I've had the good fortune to drive. We went to Dublin in a Rapide that Aston Martin very kindly lent to the club at the time to take part in a Concours event.
That's it, I remember that Concours event, yeah.
Organised by one of our sort of Irish reps, which turned out to be a fabulous weekend. Yet another memory.
We've got here, I've just noticed on this, I'm just going back, the Persuaders car, the DBS.
Yeah, at the time it was owned by a prominent Area 00 owner. He left the keys with me at, I think it was at Sandhurst. He dropped it off and he said, Mark, there's the keys. You look after it for the period of time it's here. I didn't take advantage of that, of course. It would be a really silly thing to do. But it was nice that I was given the opportunity to take the keys of a very well-known car. If I go to the end of the list, the DBX is a test drive I did recently. It's the only speeding fine that I've ever had driving an Aston Martin. The fine came through and I looked at it and I thought, that's not my number plate. That's not me. They've got it wrong. Wait a minute. I did a test drive in a DBX, didn't I? I think I was doing 38 or something in a 30. The irony of it was I was sat with an ex-copper who was the passenger with me and who came from Aston Martin at Pangbourne. Another interesting time, the straight six Vantage, which is, I believe, still at the barn.
Still there?
Yeah. We took that to Eton Dorney as a representation of the trust at Jeff Sears' Area 10 evening that he has every year. And I went with Donna, and driving back, as you come out of Eton Dorney, there's a gateway and there's a lump in the middle of the road. Little did I know that it was, I went to drive over it and it clipped the exhaust. And I spent the next 3/4 of an hour trying to take the exhaust off of the car because it was hanging down.
Oh, right, that bad?
I managed to get it off, but the journey home was like driving a tank. And the noise it made, it was quite interesting.
So I'm just going to blast through this list. So we mentioned the A3, we got the Ulster, we've mentioned the Trust straight six Vantage, DBR1, the Vanquish, we've got a V12 Vantage S, we've got a V8 Vantage, we've got a DB24 Mark III, the DBS Persuaders card, Zagato Estate, DB9 GT, a DB7, DB4 GT, a DB4, DB5 Rapide S, got two Rapide S's, and your license losing DBX. It's not a bad list, not too shabby, is it? For somebody who doesn't own an Aston Martin, I think you've peddled quite a few there.
Yeah, sometimes people, I think they expect the club manager to own an Aston Martin, and over the years, members have said, "Oh, what Aston Martin do you own, Mark?" And I say, "Well, mine's a Corgi model, but I have had the privilege of driving an awful lot of other Aston Martins
without the service bills."
Yeah, and I would like to thank Aston Martin as well, on the basis that they allowed us to pick up some of these vehicles from Gaydon. There's lots of people to thank over the years, and I'll try and do that at some point in our conversation as we come to the end, perhaps.
Well, I think one of the people we should thank again, his name does keep coming up, is Roger Bennington. Now, I remember perhaps I would go to the barn and you would be there, because now I think you were the general manager?
When I first arrived, having worked for Roger, so I worked for Stratton Motorsport and Motor Company for a year. He introduced me to motorsport, really, and gave me opportunity.
Hang on. When did that happen?
So this was while I was a volunteer. So as a result of meeting Roger at Windsor and places like that.
Oh, okay. So you was a volunteer at the AMOC.
Yeah.
And yes, because there'd be a number of times where I'll go to the barn and say, oh, where's Mark? Oh, he's in Dubai with Roger Bennington doing some racing stuff.
Yeah. Well,
what? Go on, tell me about this.
I mentioned being made redundant from my pub policeman role, yeah?
Yeah.
Following that, I had a phone call from Roger, and Roger very kindly invited me to come up to Long Stratton and to look around the premises there, which I know a number of members will have done as well. He asked me if I would come and work for him, which I really didn't think twice about. He's responsible for my interest in motorsport and the involvement I've had with AMOC racing, Le Mans, and also 24-hour races elsewhere. And one in particular was 3 of his customers wanted to race a car at the Creventic 24-hour race in Dubai. And Roger tasked me with organising the trip. We had 12 of us went to Dubai. That was probably my first experience of being part of a garage team. I wasn't a mechanic. I didn't change wheels. I didn't do anything like that. But you need somebody that looks after the drivers and make sure the drivers are there when you want to do a driver change. Make sure they've got water, tea, coffee. Make sure the team have got everything they need as well. Because 24 hours is it's a long time, but it's not just 24 hours because you're there before the race and after the race. So it's probably, 30 hours of being awake. So I did the 24-hour race there. Also went to the Nürburgring and we did a 6-hour race. That was with a Lotus, mind you.
So, yes, I think I mentioned earlier, I said you were general manager. I think I got that wrong and jumped ahead. You started as an event, so you was a volunteer.
Yeah.
While you was a volunteer, you was doing some work with Roger Bennington. Then you started, it says here, you became an events coordinator.
Yeah, well, my time with Roger sort of came to an end. He sort of changed his way of doing things, and he was quite influential in my getting the event coordinator's role, which the club required at the time. And within a year, the then club secretary decided to retire, and I stepped into his shoes. I suppose I'd given enough proof to people that I was capable of doing it. And they were quite big shoes to step into. They were military shoes, ex-military shoes.
Yes, of course they were.
I had no military background at all. So anyway, I took it on. My tenure as club secretary stroke club manager, which the name was changed in the latter days. I think I'm number 3 on the list of longest serving club secretary stroke manager.
Because you say here you started at the AMOC, so you've been a volunteer, you've been a member, but you started at the AMOC on the 28th of March 2011.
Yeah, memorable sort of time to sign my contract on that day. Yeah. I've still got it, hence why I know the date.
Enthusiasm, putting your hand up, being a volunteer, well, it got you there.
I like to think so. I was not great at everything. You have a team of people that rally around you and you all work together to get things done. But I like to think that in my time as club manager there, I gave it my all. From the memory, I keep mentioning memories, I know, but it emphasises enjoyment at work. I thoroughly enjoyed my time. I wouldn't change anything. Gary, if I was to try and sum up what I like to think I've achieved in that time, I endeavoured to give every member something, to cherish, to talk about. And I know they talked about it because they always talked about it with me and other team members for years to come. I think one of the real proud things I always had was my mum, God bless her, passed away. She used to tell her friends that I worked for Aston Martin. And they used to say, Mum, I don't work for Aston Martin. Yes, but you go there. I said, I know. I used to send all my magazines and things as I would do as a member. I received magazines, but they went to Mum's address because she used to like to read about it. I talked about parents being proud of you earlier on in the early part of this. She was always very proud of the fact that
you worked at Aston Martin.
Yeah. Maybe she didn't understand quite how it all worked, but that's what most of her friends, they used to go out in the sort of groups of ladies who would go out and lunch. How's Mark? Oh, he's all right. Is he still working for Aston Martin? Of course he is.
Perfect. Absolutely lovely. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. But I think to sum up my time there, it's all about relationships, isn't it? Every single relationship that I've managed to secure with both the Aston Martin Owners Club, the Aston Martin Heritage Trust, and I'd like to mention Viscountess Down as well, because she's been a very special part of my time at the AMOC. And I was privileged to be in a position to call Diana. Of course, call her Viscountess Down if the situation demanded it. One thing I would like to say, of course, is there's you, Mr. Taylor, as well. Big thanks to you for your friendship, your encouragement and egging me on, objecting to some things. We've had our moments, haven't we? Again, we won't sort of play on those because we won't be. It's another Le Mans thing. Yeah, we won't go into those in any great depth. But I think together with people at Aston Martin, the company, just the world of motorsport, people I've grown to know there. The venues that I've managed to visit, suppliers, everyone that needs to be involved in sort of like the running of a club, I suppose. I've always gone on the premise of being part of a team. Originally, it was football, a group of players forming one side in a competitive game of sport with a goal to win. in my working life, the team ethic has been foremost in everything, and I do believe that. We all wore the shirt at the AMOC. It had team written under it.
Yeah.
And one perhaps final thing I'd like to mention is a gift that I was left by Mr. Aston Martin at Newport Pagnell, and that being Kingsley Riding Phelps, who visited the barn, and I wasn't there, but anyway, he brought a gilet which had emblazoned on the back team, which he would be issued to his team members at Aston Martin at Newport Pagnell. And he wrote me a letter. It was around the time he was looking to retire. He said such a nice thing. He said that I was always a member of his team, Aston Martin. So I'd like to thank Kingsley for that if he's listening in. And he may well do, because I know he's still got an interest in the Aston Martin Heritage Trust.
Oh, that was lovely, wasn't it?
It was just a lovely gesture.
Things come to an end, and your tenure, your shift at the Aston Martin Owners Club ended. It struck me as a trustee at the Aston Martin Heritage Trust, couldn't afford to have someone like you going off and doing something with Ferrari or MG. So that's almost
Well, I
rude.
have to confess, and this is a confession, that I did go off to another marque and support one of their festivals as well, which gave me probably a couple of months of work. But we won't go into who it was, but it was an interesting time.
Right.
And the event was at Brands Hatch.
Yeah.
The community of car clubs is quite close. It's quite close-knit. And because you go to the same places, I went to Brands Hatch and I met up with people that looked at me and went, "What are you doing here?" "Oh, hello. How are you?" But those people are still there, and they'll probably still be there next year. It might be I'm with another car marque or whatever. But I value all those relationships. I hope they don't go away.
I'm sure they will.
I don't see any reason why it should.
Let's start to wrap this up. And let's have a Desert Island Disc moment.
Can I just mention one thing? The birthday moment.
Birthday moment.
I got to a certain birthday and I thought, I'll show my passion for Aston Martin with a tattoo. I don't show this to very many people, and I'm not showing you either. Okay. I do have the company logo emblazoned across my back. And
no.
Yeah. And that will go to the grave with me, won't it?
Well, clearly. It's a proper tattoo. It's not a wipe-off job.
No. It's a proper tattoo. Anyway, I just want to throw that one in just to sort of, as we're drawing this to an end, because I won't be wandering off with other car marques. I will always have a love for Aston Martin.
Well, there's a commitment.
A testament to that, I think, is what is tattooed on my back. But trouble is, I'm not allowed to show it, I think, because there'll be intellectual property issues, which we can't have, can we?
No, we can't do that. And children listen to this, and and we don't want to point them to the pictures on the social media. No.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Grabbing my thoughts back again after hearing that scoop. If anyone's listening and they're an Aston owner or not even an Aston owner, and they're thinking of joining the AMOC as a member, or perhaps the Aston Martin Heritage Trust as a supporter, and they want to volunteer, then they think, well, am I wasting my time? I don't know what to do. What would you say?
Well, I think as a volunteer, you need to be brave and put your hand up and say, I'll do that. The outcome of that is probably going to be something that you would really have thought you would never, ever do in your lifetime. And you will just get so much fun out of it, satisfaction from doing it, and being part of whatever it is that you're joined in with. Put your hand up as a volunteer.
Take a deep breath.
And do it.
Thank you very much for your time. And we didn't just speak about Aston Martin because I wanted to find out more about you. Some of it's quite disturbing, but we have found out more about you. So thank you for that. And the Aston Martin history, obviously, it goes through your veins and it's clearly now on your back as well. So I really do thank you for that and taking the time to come down here.
Well, thanks for inviting me down to Podcast Towers. I'm sure we've missed things which, when we finish today, I'll be thinking, I wished I'd included that. I wished I'd remembered that.
Some people always say that.
You never know, there might be an opportunity to do something else.
Yeah.
Because we still have many more years of
stories to come.
Yeah.
Well, let's do some stories that we can't do on the podcast. Should we go down the pub?
Absolutely, yeah. It's your round.
as always. Nothing changes, does it? Thanks, Mark.
And you, bye.
You're listening to the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast. Discover more about the story of Aston Martin, the cars, the people, the history with the Aston Martin Heritage Trust. You're always welcome to visit us at our museum in Oxfordshire, so find out more via amht.org.uk.